Welcome to another episode of the True North Podcast. This week, I wouldn't say special guest because he's here every week, but this week we have Sandon Wilson filling in for Matthew because Matthew's feeling a little under the weather this week. So we wish him well. Hope he gets to feeling better. I think the kids are sick too, so hopefully they're feeling a lot better as well. But
yeah, we told him to stay home. He's not. He was not allowed to come tonight.
Yeah, flu's going around right now, so I'm not saying he has the flu, but if he does, you stay far, far away.
So we're going to do this to him.
Just a little. No, thank you. We get some holy water, sprinkle him down. He'll be fine.
He'll be all right.
He'll be fine. He'll be all right. Yeah. So this week, we are going to be talking about the power of community, which is very, very important. Hard to do life by yourself. It's possible. It's just not as good.
Just not
by yourself. It's not. So yeah, I'm going to talk about a few things as far as community goes. Some cliff notes I wrote. Like one, why community matters. The benefits of community. We're going to have some obviously biblical examples of community because it's a church podcast. It's kind of bad if you don't have biblical examples.
I would be very, very, very upset if you did not.
That's true. Saying he would rage. You don't want to see him when he's angry.
And I say that, and I don't have any kind of reference because I was not supposed to be doing this, as he said, because Matthew was sick. Matthew, this is your fault.
So Sandon is essentially winging it for the most part. He's thrown into it this week, so he's doing the sound, making sure all the technical stuff's working, plus joining in on the conversation.
I turned on the lights, I turned on the mics, I turned on the cameras, I made sure everything was recording. I did not make sure all the cameras were charged because I didn't know. I plugged them in, it didn't charge.
That's the first question you always ask when something's not working. One, is it plugged in?
Yes.
If it's not plugged in, well, that's your problem.
Well, it was plugged in, and I don't know what happened. So that's another problem we'll have to figure out down the road.
Essentially, it's Sandon's fault.
Yes.
Maybe even the fact that Matthew's sick, it's probably Sandon's fault. So
yes. Probably not.
He admitted it. He said yes. It's on camera, so you already said it.
Oh, this is already starting off bad.
Yeah. Which brings me to my next point is the challenges in community as well. We're going to talk about some of that, too, because there are challenges in community.
I feel like there's a bunch of challenges in community.
Oh, but no doubt. And then we're going to talk about, also how to cultivate in community as well, which it seems like a lot of topics. I mean, we're going to try to do 30 minutes is what we shoot for each week. So we're not going to go for like an hour like that first episode. That's a lot to stomach all at one time. Most people don't have time to sit down for an hour and listen to us. Do you want to listen to us for an hour?
I have to listen to y'all for an hour.
That's true. He does all that editing, so he has to listen to it. Well,
no, more than that, because I have to sit in here and listen to y'all for the hour.
Hours.
And then I have to, yes, hours. And then I have to come back and actually record or take all the recordings down and actually edit them. So it's more than that.
It's a miracle he even wants to be around us at all anymore at that point.
It's debatable.
But it's, again, importance of community. Even if they drive you nuts, it's the importance of community. Well, essentially community anyway is, obviously we were, from the very beginning, we were created for relationships.
Right.
You can go back and look in Genesis 2 where God says it is not good for man to be alone. So I'm like, right out the gate, God's like, man doesn't need to be alone. We're not supposed to be alone. And obviously the church, if you look in 1 Corinthians, is described as a body. Each member of the body has its own job, right?
It does.
Like your fingers can't do necessarily what your feet do. Unless you're a monkey, then they both work the same. But we're not monkeys because evolution isn't real. Spoiler alert. I might have just shattered your entire world right now, but evolution is not real. I know. I messed that up.
What?
I'm so sorry.
Spoiler alert.
Teachable moment for Sandon. Like I said, he just jumped in, so he's learning all sorts of new things this week.
This is great, and this is fun.
This is great and fun. But yeah, no, essentially, think about it. Your hands don't do what your feet created to do. Your feet weren't created to do what your elbows were do, what your nose would do. Each has its own specific duty. And it's the same way in the body of Christ as the church. We each have our own role, right? If we all could do the same things, then, we wouldn't necessarily need each other because then we could do it all. But then again, that's why we need Christ too, because we can't do it ourselves. We can't do it all ourselves. Look at Jesus, for example, right? He came and changed the entire world with 12 guys, right? Fishermen, zealots, tax collectors, like really messed up people. Just watch this podcast. There's some really messed up people trying to do the Lord's work here. In case
I'm trying my best, okay? It's a work in progress.
Just watch the first few minutes of this. There's some messed up people trying to do God's work, okay?
Just wait for the blooper reel that's going to come out.
Yeah, don't watch that. We're going to get canceled. Big time.
Canceled.
So hope you enjoyed the podcast. This is it.
We are a three and done.
Three and done. That's all we
got to do it for Dale.
We are just that good. So But no, I mean, we all have our own unique gifts, abilities, talents. Like, obviously, not everybody's meant to teach. I know, like, you know, I do the teaching as the youth pastor and stuff. Well, then Matthew teaches as well. Like, he's filled in before. He teaches at the school.
He does a really good job.
He really does. Yeah, he really is. He's just very articulate. Like, just a really intelligent guy. Probably one of the smartest people I know. Like, I feel like whenever I'm teaching on Wednesdays, he's watching. You know how some of the schools, they have, like, I don't know what they're called. You might know. They come in and evaluate, you know, how the teachers are doing and everything.
It's usually the principal that does that.
Right.
He comes in with, like, the notebook just to make sure they're doing their job and stuff. I mean, back when I was in school, it's been a long time. Back when I was in school, that's usually what it was. It was the principal or the assistant principal. They go in there and they do their evaluations that way. That's
how I feel when I'm teaching when Matthew's there, because, like, he's just so smart and articulate and just really good with words and analogies. I feel like, even though he's not, I just feel like mentally he's just, like, critiquing me a little bit. You know what I mean? Even though I know he's not, but it's just a lot of pressure for me sometimes, because he's fantastic at what he does. You are too, so don't downplay yourself.
I try.
Like, that's all we can do, brother, is try. That's what we're all trying in this life.
Look, this would not be possible without me.
I mean, he's right, essentially.
I don't want that to sound bad. That sounds really bad. What I mean is, like,
big head.
I don't think that from the way we've got this room set up with all the cameras and all the lights and the microphones and all this other kind of stuff, that was a really long and drawn out thought process.
Right. You had a vision. You made the vision happen. You articulated it the way that you wanted it. And he's just tech savvy, so all of the setup and stuff, I couldn't have figured it out. So, again,
it's taken me a long time to figure out the editing, but now that we've got that figured out, we're here.
But again, that's why community matters, because you have each person with their own gifts and abilities that can come together and make something like this happen, essentially. Because, again, if I knew all this stuff, we wouldn't necessarily need each other to do it, but it'd be boring just to listen to me by myself or you by yourself or Matthew by himself. You by yourself would be an interesting podcast. I'd listen to that.
It'd be like a Theo Vaughn.
It'd be brain rot.
Yeah, definite brain rot.
Pokemon, fishing. Yep. That's
it.
That's what comes to mind.
That's it.
That's what comes to mind.
Fishing, hunting, a little bit of Pokemon.
That's the good thing about community, though, is because we're all different in that way. We all have our own likes.
I just wish that how do I word this? I wish that I had a better sense of what that was going to be back 20 years or 30 years ago, because, you know, I potentially got rid of a $400,000 collection for $150.
It's just the world we live in. I mean, there's all sorts of, there's probably stuff I have now that's going to be worth however much in 20 years. And to me right now, it's probably just stuff that's in my house, you know, like my championship belt collection, that might be worth, I mean, it's worth something now, but I mean, even later on, you know, which, you know how picky I am about
I feel like with the wrestling thing, that's a definite thing that's getting bigger and bigger. So I don't think you have anything to worry about.
I don't. I picked the right hobby.
I wouldn't go that far.
Yeah, you're right.
I will say that I have enjoyed going when I've got to go with you. I have thoroughly enjoyed myself.
And see, that's, again, the good thing about
because
community.
I don't know what to expect.
Yeah.
So I'm brand new to it. I have nothing that I know is going to happen. Like, oh, this person is supposed to win this person is supposed to win that. I don't know. I'm just there for the show, and it's been pretty good. I've enjoyed it.
Sign up for my course. I'll teach you a thing or two. I already got to teach Callie's friend Sydney. She's going to take my course and learn a thing or two as well.
Oh, so she's going to you with a show?
Yeah,
to a show?
Well, not to a show, but I just said she could take my course because.
What's the course?
Well, learning wrestling, because she's like, you know, shouldn't the referee notice that? I'm like, oh, Sydney.
The referee controls everything. Spoiler alert.
I can't get into that right now. But anyway, that's a good thing about community, though. It's like we all have different interests and likes.
Yeah,
and
now we're talking about the wrestling community.
Yeah, look, it's a terrible place. Trust me, it's not good.
Oh, I know. But
but that's the good thing about community is like we obviously have differences of what we like and what we don't like and things that interest us and all that, and like the wrestling, for example, or fishing, because Sandon got me fishing there for a little while. I mean, you still have a rod and everything.
I still got your rod at the house.
I mean, we went fishing a pretty good bit, and like I'd never really I had fished.
What was your record? You caught a fish, what was it, 4 times in a row that we went?
It was more than that. I mean, I had
4 or 5?
I had a good streak going until
He lost his shoe in the mud.
I lost both shoes in the mud.
Oh, man.
I lost both shoes in the mud. And I had 2 fish on the line, but they broke the line both times, so that kind of ruined it for me.
I will say, though, that was kind of an interesting day. All we heard was, like, screaming, and we look over. So we were fishing this little farm pond. We just kind of look over. Help! And we go back to where we were thinking that he had come across a snake or something, and next thing you know, we see him, he's like knee deep in just straight mud, and we go to pull him out. He lost both his shoes and his socks.
Worst nightmare scenario. I'm not an outdoorsy person anyway, right? I mean, I like to be indoors. I'm a homebody. Like, I like to go out and do other things, but like, just the great outdoors is not my department, I should say.
I enjoy it. I really do. I enjoy going to the woods and just sitting there. And Matthew will attest to this when he gets to come back on. Whenever you're sitting in the woods, here's a God moment. It is so cool to sit in the woods and just watch the world come alive, because you're sneaking, like when you go deer hunting, you're sneaking in there close to an hour before, sunrise. So sometimes even longer, depending on the time of the year. But we're not getting into a hunting tutorial, because I definitely should not be teaching a hunting tutorial. But anyway,
be here all night.
We'll definitely be here all night, and you ain't gonna learn anything. But no, it's really cool to see the world come alive. Like, you'll see the little Tweety birds, they'll start waking up out of their little nests and stuff. You see the squirrels start waking up, then the rabbits and everything else. Then here comes your deer. And it's just really cool to see, because when you sneak in, like, it's completely quiet. And, of course, you're being as quiet as you can with what you got. And then you get into your tree stand, get into your deer blind, and you're just sitting there, and all of a sudden, everything just starts waking up. And it's just so cool to watch. And you just sit there and it's like, man, it's like...
Kind of makes you wonder if that's how, like, when God created the world at the beginning, like, if that's kind of how it was. Like, it was just, like you said, being out in the middle of the woods, and it's just seeing, hearing nature and just God's creation around. Just even recognizing things that you probably take for granted during the day-to-day, or that you don't really recognize. Like, you're just sitting there in that stillness and that quietness and just hearing, like, maybe new things that you really would never pick up on. It's just like, oh my gosh, like, just the way that God has intertwined all of this together. It's just this beautiful creation of His.
I know you've never experienced it, but you're going to experience. Nope. You're going to experience it next year. We're going to take you. But if that's definitely one of my top, like, 5 things, like, I really, really enjoy.
I felt God at that wrestling show.
Oh my God!
Somebody did have that sign one week that said, Linda loves Jesus, but she drinks a little. That's pure redneck wrestling fan.
That's definitely, dude. And yes, going to these shows with you, I have seen, like, you get the rednecks.
You do. But see, here's the thing. It's the benefits of community, man. Like, you take interest in other people's hobbies and interests, dislikes, not dislikes, and you bond over that, even if it's not essentially your thing, your niche, I guess you should say. Because, again, I'm not an outdoors person. I've never been hunting a day in my life. I've only really been fishing the times I've been fishing with you. But it's like, even though it's not really something that I do on a regular basis, it's something that I enjoy doing with you, because we're doing it together, essentially, right? Like, if I was doing it by myself, it would not be fun.
Yeah, you definitely would not know what's going on. It would suck,
because I'm just out here catching a fish. Like, I don't have anybody to share that with. Like, you want to be with people.
Or anybody to take the fish off the hook for him.
No, hey, I take the fish off my own hook now.
It took him a while.
I figured it out, essentially, after a while. But no, it's stuff like that. And it's the same thing with doing ministry, too. Like, when you and Matthew first started helping, like, Matthew was, familiar, like, being in a teaching aspect almost. And then, him, like, growing up in youth group as well, and then coming in and helping. And, you came along as well about the same time he did. And
yeah, I think we did come up right at the same time, because I think I want to say maybe like a week or two difference. That was literally the difference.
Right, yeah.
That was literally it.
And essentially it was still brand new to both of y'all. Like, me and I had already been doing, youth ministry for several years at that point, but I always knew that was my calling anyway. But for y'all, it's like jumping into something like brand new. You don't really know what you're getting into.
The closest thing I had been to youth group was actually being in youth group when I was at my other church.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's like,
and that was years and years ago.
Yeah. I mean, it's completely different, even from the time, I was in youth group to now. Like, it's a totally different generation, totally different world that we live in. So
1,000 times
and
different.
you start to learn as each year goes by, like, it's continuously evolving and changing with the way the world is evolving.
And the worst part about it is some of it's for the good, but a lot of it's for the worst too, with the way technology is with social media and all this other kind of stuff.
Absolutely.
And then whatever else goes on in the world that gets trickled down into the world, or into the youth group. If that makes sense.
Yeah, and essentially, it was one of those things. I was pretty much doing it by myself for the most part for the betterment of those several years. I had, Andrea was there obviously, but she's not gonna put herself out there, and she's very introverted. So I mean, it's not like she was, hands on, doing this and that. She was essentially there, female leader, because you got female students. I'm not going to put myself in a position. Not that obviously I'm not going to do anything, but it's better to have a female adult when you have female students. But it was basically essentially just me, you planning retreats or camps and trying to get this done and that done. And again, the benefits of community in that sense, like we were talking about, is you get, a group of people, even though essentially if it's not necessarily their thing, you get a group of people that comes together. Everybody's got, their own gifts, talents, abilities, and you come in, like, even the stuff like with the podcast, like stuff that we do for youth, just the ideas that you guys come up with that, essentially, if I had thought about it when I was still kind of doing it on my own, I'd be like, okay, that'd be great, but I can't pull this off, without volunteers or other people, you know what I mean? You don't get a lot of people, jumping on the train to help in youth ministry or even like children's ministry and stuff like that a lot of times. So you get people that come in and have these ideas, and over time, and even like you guys, you can see how you evolve and how you start to kind of fit into everything. You start to get into the flow of it. You know what I mean? And it's like that with any church mission. I did children's church for a little while, because I was like, well, they need some help. They need some more teachers. And I did it. And I can tell you right now, 100% children's church is not my thing. And you think it would be because, I mean, youth ministry, children's ministry, it's both, young kids, but it's just.
Children's church is like herding cats.
It really is.
It's like herding cats.
Their attention span, like teenagers' attention spans are already rough enough as it is, but children's attention spans.
Like less than 5 seconds.
Good luck.
Like, if you ain't playing like some kind of movie or something like that, then you're not going to have their attention.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, you could get their attention with drawing or something like that, but you can't just sit there and like talk to them because they're like, oh, look, butterfly. It's not going to work.
Absolutely. But see, the good thing is, like, when you get involved with stuff like that, like we talked about, if it's not your thing, right? But in the right community with the right people, it's encouraging, one, because you have other people that can kind of help you along the way. Just like I've been able to kind of help you guys as we go through Unistry, and even you guys have helped me in a lot of ways too, because again, I did it by myself for so long, and now that you've got more people, it's almost like, how was I even doing this before? Both of them were volunteering and helping out, you know what I mean? It's like a huge benefit and a huge blessing. And then you get the accountability with it too, because again, we struggle in life, we go through things that, and me, for a long time, I was never comfortable with like sharing things in my life. Like if I was dealing with something.
Oh, I still ain't.
It's a challenge.
It's very challenging.
We're human. We don't like to admit when we're having weak points in our life or when we're having trouble, because we think people might think differently of us. Like, why is he dealing with that? Or they might talk behind your back or something like that. You know what I mean? Because it's church, right? Spoiler alert, the church isn't perfect. There's some pretty terrible people in church. I'm not like singling out Northside like, man, we got some awful people at this church. I mean, like the church as a whole.
Oh yeah,
there's no perfect church out there.
It's just like some of those memes you see like on Facebook or whatever. It's like, what's the one meme? It's like it goes. It's got like the little old grandma lady sitting in church, like 11:30, and then at 12:05 she's cussing out the Mexican restaurant.
Oh, for sure, yeah. I mean,
person,
typical Baptist,
because they didn't bring the queso out or something. It's just one of those kind of memes.
Typical Baptists. You know who you are. But that's the good thing, though. I mean, take even last year, for example. I'd been doing this so long, I started to feel burned out, was struggling because I'm working full time. I'm trying to do youth ministry all at the same time, and eventually I just had to break down and like tell you guys, like, listen, I need like a break. I need a sabbatical just to get myself right with the Lord again, just me and Him and all that stuff. And you guys, like, I was worried essentially because I'm like, that's just a big ask to like have to ask them like, hey, I need a break. Can you guys like fill in, because it's a lot. Like people that don't understand, they're not like in the inner workings of being like in like specific ministry. Like serving and volunteering is one thing, but when you're like in and like running a ministry, you know, it's a lot of work, as you guys have figured out.
I'll kind of be honest with you. It really wasn't that bad. It was the same thing as like I was saying with the children's church. It was kind of like herding cats,
right?
Because all they want to do is play video games. We're like, no, we're trying to have we're going to do a lesson, because even though Matt's not here, we're going to do a lesson.
Yeah, and it's kind of like even being in like public school where it's like, oh, the teacher's not here, so we can get away with a little bit more. It's like, no, not really. It's like we're still trying to accomplish the same goal each and every week to get you to know Christ and to grow in relationship with Him and with each other. But again, that was the great thing, you know, when I finally like, you know, sat everybody down. I was like, listen guys, I'm just exhausted, I'm burned out, like I feel like I'm pouring from an empty cup. And you guys, like, without hesitation, it's like, oh, no big deal. Like, we got it. Like, do what you got to do, and we'll cover the rest and all that stuff. And that was a huge relief.
Oh, yeah.
Because not everybody has that. I mean, in a lot of other places.
You got very lucky to have me and Matthew.
I'm blessed,
and Paul.
Man. And Paul. Because Paul.
Shout out to Paul.
Yeah, shout out to Paul, because he covered Sunday school during that time, too. And, man, the kids loved it. I mean, the kids loved having Paul. They loved having you guys, too. Which, I mean, even tonight, you could tell, like, you would went to go get food, and Elise was like, well, where's Sandon? And like, where's Matthew? Like, when you're not here, obviously your presence is felt, and they notice, and they want you guys to be there.
Spoiler alert, I went to go get Pokemon cards.
He did. I mean, because it came with the Happy Meal or whatever. But, I mean, that's the great thing is that accountability that's there, because we get afraid. We're afraid to be vulnerable because how church culture is sometimes now, because there's horror stories out there.
Oh, most definitely, dude. That one podcast that we listen to, and even we share the videos on Sunday mornings and whatnot, and on Wednesdays. What's the name of it? Just your friend or whatever.
Oh, the Youth Group Chronicles.
Yeah, Youth Group Chronicles. That right there is just that's a great example of horror stories.
Oh, no doubt. I mean,
some of their stories that they get are just like, oh my gosh.
Well, there's even like I'm part of a few different groups on Facebook for like youth pastors, or there's one for like pastors of small churches and things, and like you can go on there and you can comment anonymously, because it's supposed to be a place, again, it's supposed to be a community for people who are in like the same line of ministry to be able to share and get advice and things of that nature. And just some of the horror stories where, you know, just some of the youth pastors are just trying to, you know, do work for the Lord, trying to get these kids to grow, and then you've got church leadership that's trying to just come down on them. It's like, oh, well, you can't do this, you can't do that, why are you doing this? You
discourage that leader from doing something.
Yeah, I mean, and it's almost like, because obviously church is church, like it's supposed to be a place where you can come together as community, be encouraging, uplifting one another. If you're struggling, you can tell people. But there's also like the business side of it too, and that's the hard part about being a ministry also, because I mean, there's community in that as well, but a lot of churches, because I think our church is really special in that way, because obviously we have deacons, we have Pastor Ronnie, the senior pastor, and I'm the youth pastor, so we have to talk business at meetings and stuff. But even that, it doesn't necessarily feel like being run like as a business, does that make sense? Like it's just a group of guys that have been entrusted, you know, by the church to make the right decisions and lead the church in the right direction, you know, financially, spiritually, all that good stuff. And we sit down and we talk about what needs to be done. We go through it. Yeah, we don't always agree on everything, you know, but at the end of the day, we're going to make the right decisions of what's best for the church and not let, you know, how we're feeling stand in the way of it necessarily. Like we want to make sure we're making the best possible decisions to ensure the future of the church and make sure that we're going to grow spiritually for sure. And
as you should.
Yeah, as you should. And then, like I said, I've seen a lot of horror stories in these groups of youth pastors. It's like, hey, they just told me that, you know, they're cutting me down to part-time because they don't feel like I'm meeting expectations, or they've cut my position altogether because they feel like, you know, so-and-so can do a much better job than what I'm doing. And it's like, they're not coming to these guys sometimes and just talking to them like, hey, you know, this is kind of what we want to see more of. This is kind of what we want to do. Like, there's no communication involved whatsoever. And you can't have a healthy, strong community without communication, just like any job. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
And so if you have community, like the communication has got to be key. Like you can't have community without communication, or else you just got a bunch of people running around doing whatever, and that's how people get mad at each other. And that's why people, you know, essentially like leave the church because somebody does something that they don't like. And
that's usually what happens.
Yeah, it's like they don't want to go and talk to, you know, person X about, you know, this thing that's going on, and then person Y is getting mad at them, and it ends up being a whole debacle and ends up getting crazy.
Bunch of unnecessary drama.
And that's why I was saying earlier that there's challenges in community also, because it's not always easy, because there's going to be conflicts, there's going to be misunderstandings, and you know, we've had that at our church. Like, I'm not going to say we haven't, because again, there's no perfect church out there. There's no perfect church out there, but and that's the thing too, is it's become so common now, like if you disagree with one thing in your church, then people are like, well, I'm just going to go find another church. And then if something happens there, well, now I'm going to go find another church. And that's not what community is. Like, a strong community is supposed to be able to have disagreements, be able to sit down and talk to each other about, you know, well, this is why I don't think we should do this, or this is why I don't agree with this. And then you can move on from that, and you keep, I mean, look at the disciples. I mean, they are literally the perfect example of what community is supposed to be within the church. And I guess that's why Jesus chose them, because again, they all had different backgrounds in life, right? They all had different occupations beforehand, and they argued a lot. I mean, just read throughout scripture, like they're always talking about different things, like, well, I think we should do this, and like, no, we need to do this instead, or I want this position of power, you know, when Jesus, you know, ascends back into heaven and all that stuff. Like, there was always just bickering back and forth, and Jesus again always just had to reel them in, let them focus on the big picture, like, hey, remember why I'm here, remember what we're here to do. But the thing is, they always sat and talked it out enough to where they can continue with their mission, even if they didn't always agree with each other. I know The Chosen's a big show that people watch, and
I was just going to say that The Chosen has really done a good job of portraying that.
It depicts a lot of like their morality, because a lot of times people read the Bible, and like me, if I read something, I get a visual of it in my head while I'm reading it, right?
Right.
And The Chosen, it kind of gives you that sense of their morality, because it's like, yeah, they were these spiritual followers of Jesus, and Jesus was obviously the Son of God, but it also shows you their humanity on top of that.
Oh, yeah.
Because it showed that they had a sense of humor. It showed that they had very strong feelings about certain things, on what they think Jesus should be doing, what they don't think Jesus should be doing, like how they can protect in this way, what they need to do this way. Like, there's always a lot of back and forth, and yeah, they got mad at each other, and it's just like the church is now. But we're supposed to be able to come together, differences and all, and sit down and kind of talk about these things. And, you know, you can still leave and disagree on something and still have the same common goal in mind. It's like, okay, well, I don't think we should necessarily do that, but if you guys think it's going to work, fine. As long as the common goal is to reach people for Jesus and to grow spiritually as well, then that's great. But again, it might not necessarily be that person's thing, because I mean, there's all sorts of things in church that people do that might not necessarily be something that you're interested in, or might not even think that would work. I mean, for example, like at our church, we have like a darts ministry, you know, and some people might disagree with
points
that.
of light.
Yeah, points of light. And some people might disagree with that. They might think, oh, well, they're trying to be like a bar because they're meeting on Friday nights and throwing darts in the church, whatever. There might be people that disagree with that, but again, it helps.
I love doing it. It was fun. It was really a lot of fun.
It's a great men's
with
ministry.
No beer involved.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the good point, is like kind of how they were looking at it. It's like, it's a great way for men to get together, to get outside of the world where there are temptations and other things, to go up there and just have fun, throw some darts together, and fellowship. And
Jason would grab like a piece or two, and we'd have some drinks downstairs. And it was great.
You're eating and throwing darts, and I'm like, there's no harm in that, you know.
And we'd literally be there from like 7 to like 11:30 or 12 o'clock at night some nights.
Oh yeah, like at first when he was kind of talking about it, it's like, we're gonna have a darts ministry. Like I was skeptical. I was like, what? I was a little confused, because I'm just like, how many people are gonna come, you know, just to throw darts or whatever? Because I had never really like thrown seriously, you know. No. When they said they were going to do it, I'm like, okay, well, I'll come, I'll check it out, you know. And then I went that first time, and I was like, this is great, you know. Like I went and bought my own darts after that, so I didn't have to borrow somebody else's. But man, I looked forward to going.
I didn't go that far. I just borrowed, because I was like, I don't, because I didn't really know like what to spend, so I was just going to use what was available to me.
Right.
So I was just going to like, because looking on Amazon, like you'd have a $20 set versus like a $100 set, and I was like, people really spend $100 on these things?
Oh, for sure, yeah, absolutely. And again, it might be one of those things at first, it's like, I don't know, and maybe you disagree with it. But again, if people as a community will try to at least understand from a certain aspect too at one point, and be like, instead of just dismissing things, you know, it's real easy just to dismiss things back. That's a stupid idea, don't do that. Like actually come together, maybe check out what's going on, and then even if you don't necessarily like it after that, but you see the fruits from it, because I mean there was a lot of guys coming to that darts night, you know? And I'm like, obviously it's working. It's reaching, you know, a group of people that need to be, I mean, because we had guys that don't go to church that were coming, and that's a great way to bring people from the outside in.
I think one night I showed up and it was, I want to say it was like 12 people. I think.
Oh yeah,
it was like it was a good little crowd.
It was packed out, and then usually you try to run from.
We only got 3 boards, so
right?
It was a bunch of jumbling in that little room we got it.
A lot of taking turns, but I mean, it worked. People were happy. They were having a good time. There was great discussion. There was discussions, you know, that we might have discussed certain topics that, okay, well, I disagree with this, you disagree with that, but again, at the end of the day, we're all friends and community. Don't always agree on everything, but we're having a good time and we're fellowshipping there at church, you know, even if it's just throwing darts or if it's youth ministry, children's ministry, you know, singing.
I think if it was going to be a time where we were going to have a disagreeing argument or a disagreeing conversation, that was going to be like where it should happen is one of those kind of events.
Oh yeah, it's good to be, because again, the importance of community is you can be in a setting where you feel safe and where you can talk about certain things and know at the end of it that you're still going to walk out and see each other on Sunday morning and be friends and all, even if you disagree with something, you know.
Just a bunch of guys being dudes.
But that's the thing, the challenges of community, right? Because community is not always perfect. It's just like families. Families aren't always perfect, right? You know, it talks about in Colossians, you know, to practice patience, forgiveness, and love, and you need a lot of that in the church. A lot of that. Like when people talk about community, because you see a lot of churches, they advertise, you know, community, and I know Matthew mentioned it on one of the last podcasts that we did too, you know, how these businesses always say like, oh, well, we're a family at such and such corporation. And we like to think, you know, at our church that we always say we're a church family, right?
Oh, yeah.
And families have disagreements, and that's when you really got to put into practice that patience, forgiveness, understanding, because it's going to happen. You're not going to find a perfect church where none of that stuff goes on. You're going to find somebody that you disagree. I'm pretty sure I've ruffled some feathers and people. I'm not even pretty sure. I am 100%.
I know I've ruffled feathers.
I'm 100% positive I've ruffled people's feathers before and have made people mad. And you know, a lot of it was my fault too, because I have a short fuse a lot of times, and sometimes I can jump the gun on my feelings a little bit, and I've learned to kind of control that a little bit more. But as I get so passionate about certain things, you know, and sometimes I have to get out of my own way and look, again, it's part of the community. You got to get out of your own way sometimes and see it from a different perspective. And I've had to learn that lesson the hard way a lot, especially in ministry, because you may have a certain idea and somebody might say, well, maybe you shouldn't necessarily do that because of X, Y, and Z. And in your mind, it's like, well, they're saying I have a terrible idea. You know, they're saying that it's bad, and you can get really easily mad about that. But it's like, well, maybe just hear them out and listen, you know, and it's not necessarily that you have a bad idea. It just needs, you know, some tweaking here, some tweaking there, or whatever. And like I said, I know I've ruffled some feathers and stuff before too, but I mean, at the end of the day,
ruffling feathers is a healthy thing.
Yeah. I mean, you got to be able to have the hard conversations. Like you can't,
you're throwing rock into the stagnant pond.
Absolutely.
That's all you're doing.
That's all you're doing. But you have to be able to have tough conversations in community too. Cause I mean, you're not going to progress. You're not going to move forward. You're not going to grow unless you're able to have those tough conversations. Like the church is a wonderful place, you know, for uplifting and encouraging. His radio.
I was waiting for it.
Stole their tagline.
That's what I was waiting for.
As
soon as you said that, I was saying, his radio. I
hope that wasn't a copyright infringement. If anything, it's a plug for them. But no, that's a good thing because, I mean, you look at it that way. I mean, even over the last couple of weeks, like 2025 started off really strong at the church. You know, there's a lot going on, you know, with Andy and his sickness, and then Christina, Jeremy's girlfriend, her mother is got cancer as well. And just to be able to see, you know, people come together during a time of prayer and just to lay hands, you know, on people during that time and let them know like, hey, you don't have to do this by yourself. Like, yeah, it sucks. It's horrible. We wish it was going differently, but you can look around and see that you have a community around you that's not going to let you deal with that by yourself. And that's a beautiful thing.
Oh yeah.
And a lot of people, I think, when they think about church, they obviously want to go to a place where they feel supported and can have people to lean on in that sense. And that's what I'd like to think of our church as well, because I've seen it a lot happen here. Matthew's touched base on it before too. Like it really does feel like a family and a community when you're here, because you know, like, hey, if you need prayer, you're going to have people pray for you. You're going to have, I've had people, you know, over the years, like if I'm dealing with something, like when my dad passed away, when I was on my sabbatical, all that stuff, people, you know, just text me, because, you know, some people don't want to call because they don't want to bother you, but just even like a simple little text message like, hey, just wanted to let you know I'm thinking about you, I'm praying for you, if you need anything. You know, if I cashed in on all the times people said, if you need anything, let me know, I could probably rack up on a lot of stuff. Like, well, now that you mention it.
You ain't kidding.
But the thing is, too, you know, a lot of people will say that, and there's a lot of empty words behind it. It's like, well, if you need anything, you know, just let me know. And then, you could message some people and you're not going to get anything out of them. But I really feel like the majority of people at our church, if you were to say like, hey, would you be able to do this? Like, this is what I really need right now. That a lot of people would not hesitate to drop whatever they're doing and be there for you at a moment's notice. Like, I honestly feel, and people have before, like big time, and I've done it for people too. And that's an important part of community too. And I think through that, when you have that strong of a community that can be there for one another, when those challenges come up, when you do have disagreements or something really bad's going on, that you don't really necessarily see eye to eye on, that community is strong enough to get through those difficult times as well. Because, I mean, our church has seen tough times. Oh, yeah. Like, long before I was here, like, since I've been here, we've gone through some difficulties. And, we braved the storm, we weathered the storm, we trust and rely on God, and He gets us through it. It's not always the easiest thing in the world, because the Christian life isn't always meant to be easy. I mean, if it was meant to be easy, everybody would be a Christian, right? If it was like...
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, and that's exactly what it is. Like, if the Christian life was meant to be easy and it was supposed to be sunshine, rainbows, and unicorns, everybody would be a Christian. But it's not. I mean, just look at, they crucified Jesus. They killed Jesus, the most perfect man that ever lived, and they killed him. So I don't know why we think we're always going to have it perfect and easy when they literally killed the Son of God. Just saying.
Yeah, we're definitely not. Sorry, I got the dog in here and she's chewing on something. I'm trying not to let her chew on something.
He's pulling double duty trying to do the podcast. I'm
pulling like quadruple duty at this point.
Trying to do the podcast and watch the dog. It's crazy, right? So, but the thing is too, like, again, during the really highs of community in the church and during the really bad low times in community in the church too, you have to know how to cultivate community within both of those frames, right? And the thing is, with that, you have to be intentional about building relationships. Like, if you don't build good and healthy relationships during the bad times, then they're not going to mean much during the good times either. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah. Sorry for that. The chairs are. I've got to clean out the wheels of the chairs.
Goodness gracious!
It's falling apart here in the last little bit. But it's okay. We've gotten this far, so I think we're good.
We're fine. But yeah, you got to be intentional with your relationships, because it's really easy to build good relationships. But a lot of times you see people, even if they have good relationships, once the first bad thing happens, it fizzles and fades out.
Jump ship.
And you jump ship, right. And people do that. They'll jump ship to another church, and it's like, well, the church did this, the church did that. I'm like, a lot of times you're just getting in your own way. A lot of times it's just you. Like, yeah, again, you'll run into some complicated and difficult people because, again, not everybody in the church is perfect. But a lot of times we let our own feelings get in the way of what God is trying to do. And maybe God's trying to use those difficult times to help build. And so when you're intentional about building good relationships, you got to be intentional just as much during the bad times too, or else you're not going to weather the storm and it's all going to fizzle and fade out. And that's when people jump churches, get their feelings hurt, churches split, and all that other stuff. So you got to be intentional about building your relationships. That's why we have, small groups. It's not just about coming on Sunday morning and coming on Wednesday night and be like, okay, I've got my church fixed for the week. Like, that's why we have these small groups where, the older adults meet, the younger adults meet. We have, obviously, youth group, children's classes, and all that, because it's good to build that community. You get around people your own age, you build community there. You build community around the other age gaps in your church and get to know them and stuff. And that's why we meet, like, in our young adult small group, because we're building relationships. We're looking forward to building relationships with each other so we can grow closer in our relationships with Jesus. And then essentially, as the church progresses, in the next 10 or 15 years, like, obviously we're going to be the old generation of the church at some point.
God, that's going to suck.
Oh, it's going to be rough.
It's going to be so bad.
But eventually there's got to be people behind the next generation to keep it going. And that's why you got to be intentional with these relationships, because if you're not doing anything outside of just sitting in a chair on Sunday morning, then the church isn't going to succeed. The church isn't going to make it, essentially. And not talking about like the church as a building and the people are in it, but like the church as a whole, like the kingdom of God. Like, you're not going to progress it forward and you're not going to do much for the kingdom without those intentional relationships.
Right.
It's just going to fail. That's why people always say, it's good to have a bunch of screaming kids in church, because they're in church. Right. It's better to have a bunch of screaming kids in church than it to be dead quiet and then your church be dead in the next 15 years.
Man, look, I have been to some churches where it's like everybody in there is like 90 years old, and it, like, you can hear a pin drop from the other side of the room, right, on the carpet.
Like, it's 20 years from then, that church won't exist.
That church will not exist.
Because nobody's in. There's no intention of, even reaching out into the community and trying to bring people in. And you're not trying to bring people in just to grow your church physically. Like, you want people to experience God the way that you have experienced Him. And again, we're all from different backgrounds and have different stories, just like the disciples. And those 12 guys changed the entire world. Obviously, Jesus changed the entire world, but he didn't do it by himself. He realized the importance of community and wanted to establish that the community, aka the church, is what you need in order to make it through this life and ultimately to bring other people to Christ. And that's how we have to be too, because in a lot of ways we are like the disciples. We are disciples of Christ, but in the same way we all come from different backgrounds. We all have different stories, but just because your story might not relate to me doesn't mean it might not relate to somebody else.
Oh, yeah.
Especially people on the outside when we do like these community outreach events. You know, we did that one a couple years back, or wasn't maybe not even a couple years back. You know, we did the event on the square where it was like for the PC students coming back to school.
Oh, yeah.
And, you know, there was like alcohol being served because they're college students, you know, so that brings them in. There was alcohol being served and stuff like that. And I guess most churches would probably think, well, let's not get involved because, you know, there's alcohol and other things going on. But when I saw it, I was like, well, we got to jump on that, you know, because it's the perfect opportunity for us to be out in the community and reach the younger generation, right? Because, I mean, it's not like we're indulging, we're not partaking in all that stuff, but we want to be there and let them know, like, hey, you know, you might be here for this, you might hear, but just to let you know, we're here too, right. In case, you know, and we had a few of the PC students actually come and visit from that. And that's the goal, right? Even if, you know, we never saw them again, the goal was we made a connection and they still came and at least checked us out.
Absolutely.
You know, and even if we weren't for them, you know, because we're not for everybody. You're like, we would like for everybody who comes to our church to want to stay and be like, yeah, this is the church for me. But we're not necessarily for everybody. And it's not like we're picking and choosing who can come. Sometimes people can come back, yeah, that's great, but I really want more of this or looking more for this. And that's great. The important thing is that you find a community that you know that you can grow spiritually. It has something for your kids, because that's super important for most families that are visiting. It's got to have something for your kids.
Because 99% of the people that visit have kids.
Oh, absolutely. And you got to have, and we have stuff for kids and everything, but some people sometimes are just looking for more that we can't necessarily offer because we're a smaller church and there's plenty of bigger churches.
We definitely have limitations.
Yeah, we have limitations, and they might just need a church that has, you know, more not expectation really, but they can offer a little bit more that they're looking to do. And that's great. You know, and I've even told other people too before. I was like, listen, I'd love if you come visit our church, and, you know, we might not be for you. And if you're looking to at least go somewhere, you know, I can point you in some directions on where you can go, because there's a lot of great churches in the area. You know what I mean? And that's how it's supposed to be. Like, not just community within our own church, but the churches in our community, we're supposed to be a community. Mm-hmm. Like, we're on the same team, but a lot of times it doesn't seem that way, because it's like, oh, well, this church is doing that. Well, we got to do this, but let's do it a little bit better so that, you know, we can get more people in and draw more people attention to us, right? And
let's just like, copy them verbatim.
Yeah,
let's everything else.
Let's copy and paste and do what they're doing.
No shade involved in that at all.
We'll copy and paste and do what they're doing, but let's try to do it better, right?
And offer lower prices.
And offer lower prices. Lord have mercy. But that's the thing. It's
sorry,
like,
no shade involved in that. I'm sorry.
It seems like in the world now, churches are more at competition with each other than they are on the same team. And that's what it's always meant to be. Like, the church is always not supposed to be limited to this building or that building. We're all supposed to be the church together. We're supposed to be the body, right? You can't have your arm going off and trying to do its own thing and then your foot going, like, because it's all attached. Like, our body is literally physically all attached to each other, and that's how the church is supposed to be as a whole. We're all supposed to be attached. We're all supposed to be like-minded with the same goal in mind, to grow the kingdom of God and reach people for Jesus. And that's just, I mean, I hate to say it, but that's not the goal of the church hardly anymore in a lot of places. It's more about like, well, we're going to do what we're doing with the people that we have, and we don't want any more than that. Right. It's like, we don't want to, you know, partner up and do this or partner up and do that. And, you know, we've partnered with churches before. You know, we've helped, you know, with the food bank here locally in town, and had collected food for them and brought it over there. And, you know, the Presbyterian church helped us out. They let us buy their van from them, you know, so that we could have, you know, a van ministry to be able to use.
Is that the van we have now?
That's the van we have now.
Okay,
yeah.
because the van we had before sucked.
Yeah, the van before that, I don't know where we got that van, but it was was terrible. It was trash. But like I said, the Presbyterian church was selling their van, and, you know, Pastor Ronnie, you know, talked.
He loves that thing.
Yeah. Oh, it's wonderful.
He loves it.
He
I like
drives
it
all
too.
the time.
I love that. I like what year is it? It's like a 93.
Like 99, I think. Well,
no, it's earlier than that. It's older than that.
But it drives good.
It's like a 92, 93 Chevy 1500. van. It's got that old school Chevy smell.
The important thing is it runs.
It runs.
The other
It's
one
got
did
air.
not.
We figured out that it has air in it.
The other one we had did not.
Yeah, it did not.
It was junk.
The
but
2 times we took it out of the parking lot.
Right, the 2 times we took it out. But I mean, essentially, I mean, that's how we're supposed to be, like helping one another out in that sense, right? You know, like we don't need this anymore, but essentially maybe y'all could use it, you know, because they had gotten a new bus and it's like, hey, we'll sell it to them. And Ronnie, you know, was able to do that, which is great.
We've definitely utilized it. It's really coming
Oh,
handy.
no doubt. So shout out to the Presbyterian Church for doing that because it's been a huge help for us. So thank you for that. And see, that's the other thing too. Who cares what the denomination is, right? I mean, it's
The
like,
end goal is the same.
yeah, the end goal is supposed to be the same. We're all on the same team with the same mission to reach other people for Christ and to grow and advance the kingdom. And that's how it's supposed to be. But again, the world we live in now, it's not always that way. And, you know, you see it a lot. And again, a lot of these groups I'm a part of, you see a lot of people more pitted against each other instead of trying to be like, hey guys, remember this. It's like the Atlanta Braves, right? Shout out. If they all went into business for themselves, I mean, they don't win a 2021 World Series, right? Mm-hmm. They don't probably hardly win any ball games. Like, we're essentially on the same team. We've got the same jerseys on. Like, we've got the same general manager, right? Which is supposed to be Christ. I know it's a weird analogy for a lot of people, but
I dig it. I was thinking it was weird too, but I was like, it kind of
works.
fits.
It
fits.
works a lot, right? I mean, you know.
Well, we will accept that analogy. It's okay.
I mean, you look at Matthew chapter 18, verse 20, it talks about, you know, focus on Christ as the center of your community. If Christ isn't the center of everything, it fails. If your intention, whatever ministry you try to start, whatever you're trying to pursue, you know, to, you know, help your church out, where if Christ is not the center of it, it's going to fail. Because that's the ultimate goal of the church, is ultimately it's supposed to be for Christ. So anything we try to do without Christ at the center, it's not going to work. And that's how the church is supposed to be. That's how our community is going to work. And it's hard to get a lot of people to see that, because I've seen a lot of these videos of guys that like deconstruct their faith and like, oh, my life has never been better since I deconstructed. I'm like, yeah, because now you're doing what you want to do. I'm like, people talking about like, oh, being a Christian, like, you know, this was difficult and that was difficult. I'm like, well, the Christian life is tough. It's hard to live that life.
It's not easy at all.
I'm like, of course it's easy to walk away from the faith and say things are better, because that's what the world wants. It wants you to live the way that you want to live and be better. And you might have community out there, but it's not necessarily the strongest and healthiest community, I should say. I'm not saying there's terrible people that, you know, don't necessarily, like, you can have friends that don't go to church that are great and wonderful people that can be a good community.
I have a bunch of them like that.
But like at the same time, it's like that's all well and good, but without Christ at the center of that, you know, it's tough to have the 100% strong community that you're supposed to have. Because if they're not on that same page and that's the page that you're on, there's still going to be that blockage there between you and them, essentially. Like, you can still be great friends and stuff, but there's going to be that one roadblock that's keeping y'all from reaching exactly the way your friendship and everything is supposed to be.
Right.
And I'd like to reiterate that more probably at a later time, because I know we're kind of getting backed up on time a little bit, and we'll touch more on that too.
Fine.
But
we're having a good conversation.
yeah, we're having a good conversation. But I mean, you can look all throughout the Bible. I mean, look, literally you can go back and read in the book of Acts, like when the church first really got started, the early church, and you could see, like, they didn't have buildings necessarily. They met from house to house. You know, they met at Joe Schmo's house this week and Cindy Lou Who's house this week, right? And that's how they had
And then
church.
the Grinch's house the next week.
Yeah, then the Grinch's house the next week on Mount Crumpet.
On Mount Crumpet.
They had church there, and, you know, they literally would give...
They had a feast.
They had a feast. They did. They would bring food. You know,
They had who pudding.
The early church was essentially Baptist because there was so much food involved, right?
Don't forget the roast beast.
And the roast beast, yes. We're getting a little too off topic there.
Okay, that's fine.
But yeah, I mean, essentially they go house to house. They'd literally give the shirts off their back. They literally would have food for each other. I mean, they would literally sell their possessions to make sure they all had what each other needed. And that's essentially what the church was intended to be. Like, sometimes we got to make sacrifices. Sometimes we got to do things we don't want to do. But when we have the intention and love one another and have Christ at the center of it, like, it's going to succeed. And yeah, a lot of those times are probably going to be hard, but as long as you have that community with Christ at the center, like, you're going to make it through that. And I feel like at least how 2025 has started off at Northside here with us, like, it's it's been phenomenal just to see what God has done each and every week. Because I mean, we've seen people coming in, people have been excited, people can see what's going on around and be like, hey, you know, God's really doing something here right now. And we don't know necessarily maybe what that is at the moment. We just know that God is at work.
Something is brewing.
Something is brewing, right? And we don't necessarily know where it's leading us to. But again, when we're faithful as a community and we're relying on one another and we're excited together and we're all working together for that same common goal of knowing Christ and making him known to other people, then the sky is the limit. There's no limits really to what God can do. There's
zero limitations.
Zero limitations. So I'm excited personally for me to see just what we've seen so far this year, what God is going to continue to do with our north side community essentially, and then to see where he can expand that as well for us to go out into our community around us, and then to partner with other churches around us, and then to essentially reach the lost that are around us as well.
It's going to be really cool to when this happens, it's going to be really cool. Whenever we come into a church on Sunday morning and there's going to be somebody like, hey, we saw you on TikTok, or we saw you on Facebook on their little reels or whatever.
That might be a little scary.
It's just going to be a little scary, but it's going to be pretty cool. I think it's going to be pretty cool.
It's going to be awesome. Like I said, we've got listeners right now that don't necessarily go to our church that tune in and are excited to see what we're going on. So we appreciate all you guys that are coming on this journey with us, and we hope you're just as excited. If you'd like to come visit us, you know, if you'd like, you know, we always start Sunday mornings. We have Sunday school at 10 o'clock. Service starts at 10:45, and then we're always, even after service is over, everybody's hanging out for like 30, 40.
Yeah, if you saw that reel or TikTok or whatever, yeah, we do. And then we'll hang out at the Mexican restaurant or the House of Pizza or the Japanese restaurant.
Yeah. We spend a lot of time together on Sundays. Like it's just great to see. It's a great thing to be a part of, and we want other people to be a part of that too. And you know what? If you come and you visit with us and it's not for you, that's fine. But just get involved in your local church somewhere where you're growing spiritually, somewhere that has something for your kids, and something for you obviously as well too, because it's very, very important to be a part of a community like that. And that's kind of what we're trying to reiterate to this episode. Like, community is the most important thing you can have in your relationship with Jesus. It's important to be a part of a community where you can be encouraged, strengthened, and uplifted. And again, you're going to have those disagreements. There's going to be some struggles, but as long as everybody has the goal in mind to make Christ the center of everything, you'll weather those storms and you will make it through it. And it's going to make your community that much stronger. So with that being said, I think that's pretty much going to cover us for this week on the True North Podcast.
I think so. I think we did a really good job.
Not too bad. We might have ran over a little bit, but it's fine.
It's fine.
Until next time, again, thank you, Sandon, for filling in at the last moment while Matthew was sick. And then Sandon will join us again in the future once we can afford another camera and can get all three of us on. He'll be joining us even more.
Yeah, I can't wait.
It's going to be great, though.
Until then, I'm just the director.
Just the director. He's a great producer.
Good director, producer, everything.
He'll probably edit this episode since he was on it and did the producing, whereas scrolling on the credits back, you know, videography, Sandon Wilson, music, Sandon Wilson, this, Sandon, what, you know what I mean?
So, I have that capability, you know that, right?
There you go. So look out for it. Like,
I have the technology.
I'm going to point right here because that's where the credits are going to scroll, and he'll probably freeze frame this, and you'll just see his name. Down. So, but anyway, guys, again, thanks for tuning in. We hope you enjoyed this episode. And also, as well, if there's topics that you want us to cover, something you got questions about, please feel free to comment, send us messages or whatever, and we'll definitely keep them in mind. We'll keep a list and all that because we want to be able to, you know, cover topics about life, God, the Bible, whatever it may be, because we all have questions. You know, we all want to know more. We want to grow deeper. So if you have suggestions, please feel free to send them because we'll take anything, really, because we want to make sure that everybody can grow spiritually, and essentially, maybe, hopefully, we can reach more people for Christ as well during this time, too.
I think we're doing a good job. I think we will.
Hope so.
Until next time.
Until next time, guys. Thanks
Peace
for joining
out.
us.
Oh, wait a minute. All hearts and minds clear?
All hearts and minds are clear.
Okay, good. Okay, now we're gone. Okay.
Right, and cut.
Cut.